Hi folks, my name is Ankita Singh. I'm the co-creator and screenwriter of Give Me Babies, and today I'm going to be breaking down 5 things I think you'll find really helpful if you're writing an action film for the first time. So the 5 topics I'm going to be covering are reading action scripts, writing for your budget, how to keep the plot moving, making sure your story has a strong heart or theme, and trusting your collaborators. So the key takeaway is really that writing an action film is pretty much the same as writing any good story. It comes down to character and theme. I'm going to be going into the specifics of how to achieve this in the context of action, and also some things to consider to make sure that your script is actually shootable. So I'm going to be analyzing our film Give Me Babies for this video. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out here. It might be useful for you to watch this first so that specific examples I use make a bit more sense, but you can also just keep watching and you'll get the gist. The best thing you can do to learn how to write action is to read action films. Most of us, when we get into cinema, we're watching movies, we're watching action films, and we love them and we want to make them, right? But when you're a writer, you really need to find the script and read it to see how the screenwriter is getting across their action beats, their story beats, their arcs, all that good stuff. Pick some of your favorite action films and just Google their script. And you don't have to limit yourself to the genre or the tone you're writing in. For example, I found John Wick was a really excellent inspiration for Give Me Babies, even though John Wick is much darker than the tone I was going for in Give Me Babies. Reading action scripts will also help demystify how to write action. Like literally, how do you describe what is happening in a fight sequence when you're not a fight expert? Like, sure, I've done some Muay Thai, but I've never smashed someone's head through a door or something like that. Or maybe one day we'll see. Basically, there's 3 broad approaches to writing action. The first is focusing on the micro detail. This is really helpful if you know your shit, you're a stunt coordinator, or you want everything to unfold in a very specific way. So this would be detailing every single punch, the type of punch, every bullet, and where it hits. The second approach is to be quite general, and this can help if you're not too concerned about the specifics of the action, you're more interested in the story, or you sort of just want to leave it to the director or stunt coordinator. This is in the territory of just writing, they fight. The third approach, and my personal favorite, is splitting the difference and going for the micro-macro approach. This is where you sort of have 1 or 2 sentences describing the general vibe of the fight, the character beats, the setting, and that stuff is punctuated with specific action lines. So I'll just look at the Give Me Babies script and see if we can find some examples to help illustrate this. Interior, underground fight club, the ring, continuous. Ari and Chris trade blows as they stalk each other around the ring with animal ferocity. That's just a really broad description of what's going on. It's just setting the scene. It's more brutal than the previous fight. Hardly any padding on the gloves. They're using elbows, playing dirty. Ari manages to get a good one on Chris, cutting her cheek. So there, we went from a broad description to a micro description. Even saying manages to get a good one on Chris, I'm not actually specifying the exact move she used, uppercut elbow or some shit like that, right? I'm just saying the action pretty broadly, but then the micro detail, cutting her cheek. And this is an important story beat because this is what pisses Chris off and makes her more aggressive. So as a writer, you gotta think, what is the action conveying? What are the little character beats or story beats or plot beats that are coming through in the action? Chris is pissed off now. She springs forward, tackling Ari to the floor. Again, pretty broad. They grapple for a moment. Ari gets stuck in a headlock. And this is where we specified a rear naked choke. So again, we went from the macro description of what's happening to a micro detail, which is a rear naked choke, which is important in this scene because, she's stuck like this, she begins to hallucinate and see the ref dressed as a big baby. Ari's confusion turns into rage. She pushes Chris off her. Again, we're not detailing how she disengages from this hold. We don't need that much detail. So it can just be as simple as just saying she pushes Chris off her. And then your stunt coordinator is gonna figure out how all that looks and works, right? She pushes Chris off her, throwing her out of the ring and onto James's table, spilling his drink on his expensive suit. Micro detail. So the point I'm trying to get across is to mix up the level of detail you're including in your action sequences. A few other things I picked up while reading action scripts was to keep it brief. No walls of text. Just like how action is punchy, you want the words and the lines and the visuals of your script to also be punchy. Using dashes and ellipses is also a really good way to add like a visual rhythm to the page so the reader can actually imagine the action beat by beat. I also personally love to like capitalize words to help break up the text and keep the reader engaged. I feel a lot of new writers are afraid to add a bit of personality to their action lines, but it's actually really important to get across your voice and sell the tone of the film. It's much better to write a concept that you know you can achieve well within the budget that you're given, rather than trying to squeeze a huge like blockbuster idea into a small budget. If you try and do that, you're just not going to achieve what you had in your mind, and you're probably not going to have a very good time on set. So a much better strategy is to know how much you have to work with and write within these constraints. Constraints are great because they give boundaries to our creativity. Otherwise, we can just go all over the place, like into infinity, right? Having a container helps us focus. When you're writing action, you have to think about the stunts, the stunt coordinator, the set pieces, the time you'll need to allocate for rehearsals and doing everything safely, and even reshooting stunts. These are all going to be lines in your budget. So if you want to have some really cool big set pieces, then you should consider cutting down in other areas of your script. These are some of the areas that we decided we could cut back on to save some cash and funnel it towards the stunts instead. Reducing the amount of locations you need for your story to be told is a really good way to cut back on costs. One of the easiest ways to cut down on locations is to find somewhere you can use as multiple sets. For example, in this sort of Mean Girls 5-way call, we have a garage, a living room, a kitchen, even an uncle in the garden. But these were all shot in the same house. We also shot this bedroom scene in the same house. This is quite a basic example, but you can take the principle and get a bit more creative with it. For example, there was this big empty car park where we shot this fight scene. There was a random back room there that we dressed up to look like a laundromat for this Zoom call with James. And here we had this gazebo set up for the wedding scene, and we used the parking lot outside to shoot this scene. So you'll notice in our film, we only have 3 locations. There was the house, the underground fight, and the estate where we shot the wedding. Having just 3 locations made everything really cost effective. Another thing you want to think about when you're writing the script is the amount of characters you need to tell this story. Now, I'm a big fan of big ensemble casts. Like, I'm South Asian, love a big fat Indian wedding. I'm also really into like Guy Ritchie and mobster stuff, and love a funny, chaotic ensemble cast. But more characters equals more actors you need to hire. So in our original script, we actually had the best friend that Ari has in Thailand. I think we were on our like 5th or 6th draft when we said to ourselves, do we really need this best friend in Thailand, asking her to come over? Like, not really. So we ended up cutting it out and found a different way to communicate the same thing, and it still works. So it does sometimes feel like a bit of a compromise as a scriptwriter when you have to cut characters or collapse them, but you sort of have to trust the process and trust in your skill that you'll still be able to get across the story beats you're trying to get across with fewer characters. It's actually going to make your script much tighter, and it's going to make it way more shootable, so people are going to want to keep working with you and hiring you and funding your projects, and that's good. Another strategy for saving money when you're writing an action film is to ask yourself, does this actor really need a stunt double? So our 2 main actresses definitely needed doubles, but the goons didn't. They just are stunties, and they were amazing. And the main baddie also didn't need a stunt double because he's actually not in any super intense fight scenes. And that is by design. We made sure when we were writing that this actor didn't have a lot of complicated stunts so he could do it himself. Conversely, we made sure that the goons didn't have any complicated acting scenes so that they could focus on the stunts. Now, the third tip I'm going to give is to keep the plot moving, even during an action sequence. Don't you just hate it when you're watching an action film and there's just this like massive set piece and there's explosions and fights and all this shit going on, but nothing happens? Like, we learn no new information, the plot doesn't move forward. I don't know, some people are really into it, but for me personally, I just switch off and that shit is so boring for me. Typically, we don't like watching stories where the narrative suddenly halts for no reason. This is one of the reasons flashbacks get such a bad rep, because when used poorly, they don't progress the narrative. We don't learn anything new about the story or the character, right? So it's not that it's inherently a bad device, it's just how it's used, which is really important. What you want to do is keep things moving, keep things unfolding using action as the vehicle. You can use action to show plot progression, like a character winning the money that she really needs. You can do reveals, like we learn something new about a character we didn't know before. Maybe they lose control or become super violent when they're really angry or under pressure. Or maybe the opposite, maybe they can't go through with killing someone and you realize where their moral boundaries are. You can learn a lot about a character depending on how they approach a fight, what strategy they use, what fight style they use, or how they even might try to avoid the fight in the first place. For example, in John Wick, when he kills someone, it's like 2 bullets to the chest. It's very clinical. He doesn't linger. He's very fast and efficient, which communicates to us that this guy is experienced. He knows what he's doing. He's a professional. Contrast this with our character, Ari. She's kind of a mess. Like in the first 2 fights, she's completely distracted because her mum is consuming her thoughts. She even panics and slaps James across the face with this envelope, which is obviously like a really dumb thing to do, right? She's pretty much like this until the very end when she's easily able to take down James, after she's come clean to her mum and they've reached a new understanding. To expand on this, my favorite use of using action to progress the story forward is showing relationship beats. So I'll quickly break down this wedding fight sequence to give you an idea of what I mean. So at the beginning of this fight, we see that Ari and May are all over the place because they aren't listening to each other, which is their whole problem throughout the film. So May literally tries to stop Ari from fighting and is almost hit in the face because she's distracted. Ari accidentally throws this goon on her mom. Then we see Amit, the supportive husband and dad, telling them to work together. They begrudgingly agree to do this. We see the symmetry of them standing sort of back to back, ready to take on these goons. And this is probably one of my favorite things that we did, was to really show them like working together as a team. One of the goons grabs Ari's dupatta and tries to rip it off her. But together, May and Ari hold the dupatta and instead wrap it around the goon, tangling him up and then throwing him onto the floor. So this is a perfect example of how action is being used to communicate a relationship beat. This is the first time Ari and May are working together and they're kicking ass, using the action to keep the plot progressing, showing our characters experiencing different emotions, revealing information, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. So the 4th tip is finding the heart or the theme of your story. Even in an action comedy, I think theme is very important. For me, like laughs and a fun time are all good, but if they're not rooted in something real, then I'm not gonna care, and it's not gonna be memorable, and it's not gonna be as good as it could be. So we were like on the 10th draft or something, and it wasn't feeling like super emotional because we were approaching it from the angle of May being an athlete and discipline being very important for an athlete, right? But she's obsessed with planning. Why is she so obsessed with planning? We hadn't dug deep enough into this character to really figure out the psychology of what's really going on here. To figure this out, I had to like sit down and really think deeply about what is going on with this character. And it actually involved me like digging really deep into like my mother wound. And then I realized this obsession with planning comes from a place of fear, right? So the fear has to be rooted in whatever life experience she had before this film starts. So when coming up with May's backstory, we decided that she married Amit and moved to New Zealand because her parents weren't happy with this intercultural relationship. So she ran away to be with Amit and she got pregnant without actually planning it. And all of this unplanned stuff in her life was so stressful and terrifying that she really wanted to protect her own daughter from this experience, which is why she's obsessed with wanting to plan everything in her life, right? So I would say the theme of this film is about the delicate balance between control and surrender, navigating planning for the future, but also embracing the unpredictability of life. But this took ages to figure out. I'm not an architect when it comes to writing. Like, some writers are able to find the theme and then build the story around it. I take more of an archaeologist approach, and I think most new writers would benefit from this approach. This is when you write your draft and then analyze it and see what's interesting, where you want to dig a bit deeper, and then keep doing this, and then by the 18th draft, you'll definitely figure it out. I just encourage you to not give up. It took me to like the 12th draft to figure it out. So don't freak out, just keep progressing, take the archaeologist approach, and you will find the theme eventually. The last point that I really want to stress is to trust your collaborators, especially people you're working with in development, whether that's your script supervisor, your director, your stunt choreographer, if you have them on quite early. They can all give you really good advice to improve your script, and they're gonna take everything to the next level. There's a lot of stuff we had to cut and change in this script, and as a writer, it can seem really scary to make like really big changes or huge cuts. But if you trust and respect your creative collaborators and you trust the process, your script is gonna be way better for it in the end. If you're unsure about something, you can just ask. And you should always feel comfortable debating ideas as well. Just remember to not take anything personally and just focus on the story and what is going to benefit the story. And always remember, a script is written 3 times. Once when you finish the script, once when you shoot, and once you're in the edit. And things are gonna change. On the day, maybe it's raining, maybe a particular stunt has to be done a different way. It's all good. Trust your director, trust your stunt coordinator, trust your producers. They're trying to bring your script to life. They wanna make something good as well. In the edit, you might have to kill your darlings. Our first cut was half an hour and we needed to get it down to 22 minutes. But think about it this way. If there's 5 jokes in a scene and 3 of them are mid and 2 of them are really good, cutting out the 3 mid jokes is gonna help make the 2 really good jokes stand out. And overall, it's gonna make you look like a much better writer and increase the standard of the whole film overall. So it's all about editing. You just gotta cut out the clutter so that the gold can really shine. Now, not every writer is gonna be involved in like the shooting or the editing side of things, but if you can, work it into your agreements or contracts or talk to your collaborators about being involved. I think it can be really handy for a writer to be on set, to workshop lines that aren't working, cut out things that you don't need. That's exactly what I did with my co-creator. And I was also involved with the post-production in the edit where we had to rework the voiceover and figure that out. And I think it contributed to creating a really great film. So try and work that into your contract. And that's the nice thing of working on lower budget things. People are a lot more collaborative at this level, and it also gives the writer an appreciation for how hard the crew is working and everything that goes into organizing logistics and doing the stunts and doing the edit. It gives you a lot of respect for everyone involved. And when you're writing your script, you're gonna have a bit of empathy for your crew, for your stunties, what you're asking them to do. I think it's really important for writers to understand like how hard it can be to like make the day and bring a vision to life. And that appreciation, I think, can just create this aura of mutual respect and collaboration and not get super bitchy when they have to like cut a scene or like move some stuff around to like make it work. You know what I mean? Anyway.
So these are some of the things I learned while writing this film. Hope they can help you when you're working on your action film or your action comedy. Script writing, like anything, is just problem solving. It's an iterative process. And if you're working with great collaborators, people who care, and you yourself are open to collaborating, you are gonna make something good. And more importantly, you're all gonna have a good time while doing it. I'll leave some useful resources in the description below. If you have any questions or have any topics you'd like me to talk about in future videos, leave a comment down below. Subscribe, hit the bell notification for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time.